Hello students, so today we will be starting with another new chapter. The new chapter name is the Cold War and the Challenges to Bipolarity. Yes, this chapter is present in the class 12 book of Political Science part 1, and here we will be understanding that what are the consequences of the Cold War and how Cold War has affected other countries during that time. So let us discuss. Now, the Cold War. You see the arenas of the Cold War. Yes, we will be understanding with the topic of the arenas of the Cold War, that how Cold War has affected other countries and what were the other significant effects regarding the Cold War. The Cold War also led to the several shooting wars, but it did not lead to another war. The two superpowers were poised for direct confrontations in Korea, Berlin and Congo, and in several other places. Now, you see, the Cold War hadn't went for any other kind of world war or nuclear war. There was Cold War between the two countries. As we know, the Cold War was between the two countries. One country is the USA and the other country was the USSR. And another country was the USSR. So as a result, it was just a Cold War and haven't went to any other kind of nuclear war or world war. But for this reason, other countries were also being affected and had direct confrontations from Korea, Berlin, and Congo. These three countries were being affected during that time for those two superpowers, and those two superpowers were considered the Russia and the US, United States of America. When we talk about arenas of the Cold War, we refer to the area where the crisis and war occurred or threatened to occur between the allied system but did not cross its limits. Now, if we talk about the arenas of the Cold War, now what do you mean by the arenas of the Cold War? Which means those places, those countries for the Cold War which has been affected due to the Cold War. As a result, it was being threatened to occur between the allied system but did not cross the limits. Now, the Cold War was between the two countries, USA and USSR. For these reasons also other countries were being affected, but it has not crossed its limits. The limits were being not crossed. You see, in comparison to the World War I and World War II, the Cold War doesn't make much significant effect to the other countries, but still some of the minor effects were being created in those countries. A great many lives were lost in some of these arenas like Korea, Vietnam and Afghanistan, but the world feared a nuclear war and great hostilities. Yes, now these arenas, you see Korea, Vietnam and Afghanistan. In Korea, Vietnam and Afghanistan also, there the common people were being affected. The innocent lives were being affected, but there was not any such kind of nuclear war. It has not trespassed its limits. You see, it has not occurred any nuclear war and great hostilities. You see, people haven't left the country. There were not much hostility in those particular places. In some cases, huge military buildup were reported. In many cases, diplomatic communication between superpowers could not be sustained. Now, you see, due to the Cold War, much of the countries were being threatened as well. Much of the countries has prepared itself for the upcoming war. So as a result, most of the country went for the military buildup. Most of the country has prepared themselves with their military base. As a result, most of the countries also prepared diplomatic relations with other countries. But here you see, between superpowers could not be sustained. Now the diplomatic relation between the superpowers means USA and USSR was not sustained. The diplomatic relation between these two countries was not continued. Jawaharlal Nehru, one of the key leaders of NAM, non-aligned movement, played a crucial role in mediating between the two Koreas in the Congo crisis. The UN Secretary General played a mediatory role. Now, here let me give you one of the example regarding Jawaharlal Nehru. You see, during the 1950s, Jawaharlal Nehru was the Prime Minister of then India. So as a result, that time there was a huge war between North Korea and South Korea. So Jawaharlal Nehru played a mediatory role to control the war between the two Koreas. Between the two Koreas, he played a mediatory role to control the war. As a result, in the Congo crisis also, the UN Secretary General. In the Congo crisis, the UN Secretary General also played a mediatory role to control the crisis in the Congo basin. You see, the Congo basin, or you can say in the country Congo is near the equator in Africa, in the continent of Africa. And if here another example comes, the Jawaharlal Nehru, who played a mediatory role between the conflict of the two Korean countries. Here he was the key leader of the non-aligned movement. the key leader of the non-aligned movement. What do you mean by the non-aligned movement? Which means those country which is not participating in a movement. This is known as a non-aligned movement. By and large, it was the realization on a superpower's part that war, by all means, should be avoided that made them exercise restraint and behave more responsibly in the international affair. Now, if I talk about the Cold War has given a realization to the countries itself that we must maintain a diplomatic relation with the other countries, also as well as we must restrain our power and become more responsible in the international affairs, which means we must behave responsibly in the international affairs and also must restrain ourselves during the war. You see, by and large, it was a realization on the superpower part. The realization on the superpower part for avoiding war. Yes, it was a realization to the superpower wars, which means those countries to avoid war and to behave responsibly in the international affairs. I hope you have understood regarding the arenas of the Cold War. Now let's go to the another discussion regarding this, how the Cold War did not eliminate, however, the Cold War did not eliminate rivalries between the two alliances. Mutual suspicions led them to arm themselves to the teeth and to constantly prepare for war. Now, if I talk about the Cold War actually did not eliminate any kind of war. It had not eliminated any kind of rivalries between the two countries, though there was not much war. Not much war was there, but there was rivalry. The rivalry was there among the two countries, which means the rivalry still sustained among both the countries, the USA and USSR. Also, many suspicions led to the arm themselves to the teeth and constantly prepare for the war. You see, just because for USA and USSR, the other countries have also prepared themselves according to the military. They have prepared their military so that they can get away from the war. The Cold War has given much more suspicious to the other country itself from other countries. You see, the other countries started suspecting other countries if that other country can go for a war or can start a war. Two sides understood that war might occur in spite of restraint. Either side might miscalculate the number of weapons in the possession of the other side. Now, if I talk after the consequences of the Cold War, most of the countries were very much afraid of the war. So they have understood that if one country is restraining for any kind of war, then there will be war from the other country, which means there can be miscalculation of the weapons. Now here you see, after the Cold War, much of the countries started making their own weapons. They have started importing other weapons. This can be nuclear weapons or non-nuclear weapons. So as a result, what had happened, most of the country has started leading to suspicions. Leading to suspicions is there, as well as it has been said that if one country can go for other war, it can go for other war in spite of restraint, which means other country can restrain for a war and it will make the other country to go for a war, which means it will be inculcating that country to go for a war. You see, just because it has been creating a suspicion, and also miscalculations of the number of weapons. So it has been the problem among all the countries regarding the war, that how war is actually affecting the people and also affecting the mentality of the government of each country. In time, therefore, the US and USSR decide to collaborate in limiting or eliminating certain kinds of nuclear and non-nuclear weapons. A stable balance of weapons, they decided, could be maintained through arms control. Now, as you see, most of the countries were suffering mentally. Most of the countries were being suffering due to war. As a result, the USA and USSR come into a treaty, which means the arms control. They will be having the use. They will be having the limitation of the use of the weapons. Nuclear weapons and non-nuclear weapons, which means most of the country will not be going for the war, and there will be a restriction in the use of nuclear weapons and non-nuclear weapons. Here you see, it has been said that to collaborate in limiting or eliminating certain kind of nuclear and non-nuclear weapons, which means USA and USSR both have collaborated with each other in the limiting of the nuclear and non-nuclear weapons. As a result, they have come into the treaty, and for that reason also, for the next 1 decade, they have signed 3 treaties so that they can limit the use of the nuclear and the non-nuclear weapons. Here you see there was a stable balance of weapons they decided could be maintained through arms control. Starting in the 1960s, the two sides signed three significant agreements within a decade. Now, there was a stable balance of the use of the weapons. There was a stable balance of the use of the weapons. As a result, they could maintain arms control. Now, as a result, there was a stable balance among all the countries as there was the limitation of the use of the nuclear and non-nuclear weapons. Also, they have signed three agreements. Three agreements has been signed among the two countries, USA and USSR, so that there is limitation of the use of the weapons. First comes the Test Ban Treaty. Second comes the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. These are the three treaties that has been signed by the USA and USSR during that time. First comes the Test Ban Treaty. Second comes the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and the third comes Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. You see, these are the three significant treaties that has been signed within a decade between the two countries, the USA and USSR. And why it has been signed so that there is the limitation of the use of the nuclear weapons and the non-nuclear weapons. Now, let's come to the next topic, that is the challenge to bipolarity. Now, what do you mean by the term bipolarity? Which means power of the two countries. The power of the two countries are considered to be bipolarity. During that time, USA and USSR are considered to be the two superpowers. So as a result, it has been termed the bipolarity, which means the alliance of the two countries. Here, first comes the roots of NAM, non-aligned movement, went back to the friendship between the three leaders: Yugoslavia's Josip Broz Tito, India's Jawaharlal Nehru, and Egypt's leader Gamal Abdel Nasser, who held a meeting in 1956. Indonesia's Sukarno and Ghana Kwame Nkrumah strongly supported them. These five leaders came to be known as the founders of NAM, non-aligned movement. Now you see, who were the five leaders who have started the organization of NAM, non-aligned movement. First comes Yugoslavia's Josip Broz Tito. During that time, Josip Broz Tito was the president of Yugoslavia. Here comes Jawaharlal Nehru. Jawaharlal Nehru was the prime minister of India. Third comes Egypt leader Gamal Abdel Nasser. Gamal Abdel Nasser was the leader of Egypt during that time, who held a meeting in 1956. You see, these three leaders held a meeting in 1956, and then comes the other leaders, Indonesia Sukarno, and Ghana's leader is Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah also supported them. As a result, it has found the organization of NAM, non-aligned movement. The non-aligned summit was held in Belgrade in 1961. The three factors which described as follows. Now, the non-aligned summit. There was a non-aligned meeting or summit in Belgrade in the year 1961. Now, what were the consequences and what were the decisions being made by the leaders there? First comes cooperation among these five countries, growing Cold War tension and its widening arenas, and the dramatic entry of many newly decolonized African countries into the international arena. By 1960, there were 16 new African members in the United Nations. Now you see, first comes the cooperation among the five countries. Those five countries which I have mentioned. First come Yugoslavia, India, Egypt, Indonesia, and Ghana. Those five countries will be maintaining cooperation among themselves. And second comes the growing Cold War tensions. Now they will be discussing about the growing Cold War tension and the arenas, means those arenas where the other countries were being affected due to the Cold War. So as a result, to control the Cold War, to control any upcoming war, those have been discussed. The growing Cold War and the widening areas. For that reason only this organization has been set up. And third comes the dramatic entry of newly decolonized African countries. Now, the dramatic entry of the decolonized African countries. Decolonized African countries means those countries which are not into the colony of other countries, which have got the freedom itself. So those are decolonized African countries. So as a result, they also have participated in the international arena. They have participated in the international area to discuss about the Cold War, and as a result, by the year 1960, by the year 1960, 16 new African countries became the members of the UN, which means other 5 countries were there and 16 new countries became the part of the organization. The first summit was attended by 25 member states. Over the years, the membership of the NAM has expanded. The latest summit was held in Havana in 2006. It included 116 member states and 15 observer countries. Now, the first summit. Here, the first summit, which means the first meeting, has been attended by the 25 member states. Means other 25 member states has also entered the summit. And second, over the years, the non-aligned movement has expanded. The non-aligned movement, which has been started by the 5 countries, has expanded its movement or expanded its organization. So as a result, another meeting was held in Havana. It was held in Havana in the year 2006. Havana is an island across the American continent. It included 116 member states and 15 observer countries. Now, slowly, after the 5 countries, then the 25 member states also included, and here came 116 member states and 15 observer countries. Means slowly, other member countries and other member states also included in the organization of non-aligned movement. As non-aligned grew into a popular international movement, countries of various political systems joined it, making it less homogeneous. Now you see, as non-alignment grew into a popular international movement, countries of various political systems joined it, making it less homogeneous. Now slowly, after the non-alignment movement started growing, it has become less homogeneous, which means it is not becoming identical, it is not becoming referred, it is not getting any kind of proper proportion to the countries itself. Now, what is the reason? You see, what do you mean by the non-aligned movement? The non-aligned movement meaning is not be participating in any kinds of war, and there will be maintaining peace and freedom among the countries itself. Means maintaining proper international affairs with proper diplomacy. This is the meaning of the non-aligned movement. And non-aligned movement, this organization was set up for that reason itself. But due to the popular movement of the non-aligned, due to the popular movement or mass movement of the non-aligned itself, most of the various political systems joined it, making it less homogeneous, which means people are not maintaining any similarity among themselves. What are the reasons they are not maintaining similarity? Now, the policy staying away from the alliances should not be considered isolationism or neutrality. Non-alignment is not isolationism, or since isolationism means remaining aloof from the world affairs. Here, I am talking about isolation. If I talk about isolation here, which means keeping us apart from everything, we talk about the introverted people, so that reason that is called as the isolation. The isolation meaning is that which means not be taking part in any of the movement, not taking part in any of the meeting. This is known as isolation. Now, isolationism doesn't mean aloof from the world affairs. You see, now if I talk about non-aligned movement, this organization has been made so that people doesn't participate in the war and can go away for the war. But this has been creating isolationism. It has been creating isolationism or neutrality. But this neutrality or the meaning of isolation is completely remaining far apart from the political affairs itself, which means the other leaders who were the part of the NAM are not participating in the world affairs or in the international affairs. Isolationism sums up the foreign policy of the US from the American War of Independence in 1787 up to the beginnings of the First World War. Now, if I talk about isolationism, it has been during the 1787. Isolationism or neutrality, it has summed up the foreign policy of the USA, which means the USA was not taking part in any of the international affairs, and for that reason only there was the creation of the World War I. During that time also, most of the American people were neutral during that time. It was the foreign policy of the US from the American War of Independence in 1787. During that time also, the American people was practicing neutrality. You see, if I talk about one country to be neutral, if it becomes neutral, then they will not be participating in other international affairs or world affairs. So as a result, isolationism means remaining aloof from the world affairs, which means that one country will be apart from the other decisions of the world affairs. In comparison, the non-aligned countries, including India, played an active role in mediating between the two rival alliances in the cause of peace and stability. Now, if I talk about our country, India, it has played an active role, a mediating role in maintaining peace between the two rival alliances. Between the two rival alliances means the USA and USSR during that time in the cause of peace and stability. The strength based on their unity and their resolve to remain non-aligned despite the attempt by the two superpowers to bring them into alliances. Now, here in simple language, it has been said that our country, India, has participated to maintain peace and integrity among the two superpowers or between the two countries so that peace can be sustained for the whole lifetime. And as a result, it can resolve the non-aligned, which means it can resolve the non-participatory alliances among the other countries as well. Non-alignment is also not neutrality. Neutrality refers principally to a policy of staying out of war. States practicing neutrality are not required to end the war. Do not get involved in wars and do not take any position on the appropriateness or morality of a war. Very, very important if I talk about non-alignment. Now, what do you mean by non-alignment? Non-alignment is not isolation. Non-alignment is not about neutrality, which means if you want to get away from the war, doesn't mean that you will not be participating in any of the international affairs or any of the world affairs. You see, during that time, some of the countries were not participating. They are being non-aligned from the other countries. As a result, they are not participating in the diplomatic relations with the other countries. You see, neutrality refers principally to a policy of staying out of war. Yes, neutrality is a principle. It is a word which means staying out of war. To stay out of war, to stay out of any kind of issues or problems of the war. But this is not the significant approach. This is not the significant approach to maintain peace. States practicing neutrality are not required to end the war. They do not get involved in wars and do not take any position on the appropriateness or morality of a war. As a result, those countries who are practicing morality, they are not participating in the appropriateness or morality of the war. They are not participating in the parts of the war or in the diplomatic relations that are being regarded according to the war. So as a result, most of the countries who are facing neutrality, they are actually facing problems regarding with the end of the war. Non-aligned states, including India, were actually involved in war for various reasons. They also worked to prevent war between others and tried to end wars that had broken out. Now you see, non-aligned states. If I talk about the non-aligned states there, including India, were actually involved in wars for various reasons. They have also worked to prevent war. Now you see, if I talk about our country, they have actually participated in the war and they have also resolved the war. They have also resolved the war and they have also resolved rivalry among the countries or between the two countries, and they have tried to end the wars that had not broken out. You see, some of the countries are there who have participated in some part of the country's affair. As a result, the other upcoming wars had not broken out. Now, as we have understood about non-aligned movement, we have understood about the consequences of the Cold War itself and also about the other countries which have participated in the non-aligned movement. Now we will be understanding about international economic order. Now, what is the international economic order? The non-aligned countries were more than merely mediators during the Cold War, the challenge for most of the non-aligned countries were categorized as the least developed countries. Now, those non-aligned countries which are merely mediators during the Cold War, yes, those non-aligned countries which are the merely mediators during the Cold War are constituted as the least developed countries. They are constituted to be the least developed countries, just because they haven't participated in the war and they are not considered to be the proper mediators during the Cold War. As a result, they have considered to be the least developed countries, which are the LDCs, was to be more developed economically and to leave their people out of the poverty. Now you see, if I talk about those countries which are least developed countries are those countries which are actually non-aligned, which are not participating in any kind of war or in any kind of diplomatic relations. So as a result, those countries are not developed. Those countries are not improved. Those countries are not developed economically, and those countries always suffer backwardness in comparison to the other countries. Economic development was also vital for the independency of the new countries. Without sustained development, a country cannot be truly free. Now, if I talk about economic development is a freedom of a specific country. If there is no economic development, then the country will not prosper. The country will not shine in comparison to the other countries. So as a result, it will not be truly free. If there is no economic development, then other countries will not be truly free, which means those countries which are practicing neutrality. All the time the countries cannot practice neutrality. They have to be the part of the diplomatic relation. They have to be the part of a war. Then only they will be able to understand the economic development of their own country. They can improve their own country. You see, they have to be mediator between or among the two countries so that they can resolve a war, or they can maintain integrity and peace with the other countries. It would remain dependent on richer countries, including the colonial powers from which political freedom has been achieved. Yes, those countries which are considered to be poor, they are always dependent on the richer countries. But all the time, one poorer country cannot be dependent on the other richer countries. So as a result, this creates a problem for those poorer countries, and there the education system is also not much proper, and also the economic problems, the economic problem doesn't go to the backwardness. It always becomes a backward country. The idea of new international economic order originated with this realization. The United Nations Conference on Trade and Development brought out a report in 1972 entitled Toward the New Trade Policy for Development. Now, the idea of the new International Economic Forum. Why this idea of the new International Economic Forum has been set up? Just because to originate from this realization, according to the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development brought report in 1972. Now, the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development on the report of the economic development has prepared a report in the year 1972. It has prepared a report in the year 1972 towards the new trade policy for the development. Now, what are the new trade policies, and what are the new trade policies that will be significant to the other countries? Now, they proposed a reform of the global trading system. Now, what are the propositions that have been proposed by the global trading system? Here you see. First comes regarding the give the least developed countries control over their natural resources exploited by the developed Western countries. Now, first, let me read you the points. Obtain access to Western markets so that LDCs could sell products and therefore make trade more beneficial for the poor countries. Let me explain you these 2 points. Give the least developed countries control over their natural resources exploited by the developed Western countries. Now, whatever the natural resources are under the least developed countries, what are the natural resources that are in the possession of the least developed countries? They have the right to use their own resources, and also it can be exploited by the other developed Western countries, which means whatever the natural resources that are under the possession of the least developed countries, that can be used by the least developed countries people as well. Also by the other developed Western countries can use those resources so that there is the economic development in those nations and also in the least developed country. Second comes obtain access to the Western market so that the least developed countries could sell their product and therefore make trade more beneficial for the poorer countries. Now, give access to the Western markets. Yes, give access to the Western markets and the least developed countries could sell their own product. Now, here comes the least developed countries. The least developed countries could make their own products and sell it to the other developed Western countries so that they can improve their economic development and they can earn some money in that way. Also, it can make trade more beneficial for the poorer countries. Yes, those poorer countries can sell their own products to the developed Western countries and it can become beneficial for the people of the poorer countries as well. Now, third comes reduce the cost of technology from the Western countries and provide the least developed countries with a greater role in international economic institution. Very, very important. You see, reduce the cost of technology. In most of the countries, the cost of technology is very much significant. It is very much higher. So as a result, to help the poorer countries, they can reduce the cost of technology. They can reduce the cost of technology. Also, other hand, they can provide the least developed countries with a greater role in the economic institution. They can provide the least developed countries with a greater role in international economic institution, which means the least developed countries can be the part of the international economic institution. Now, gradually the nature of non-alignment changed to give greater importance to economic issues. In 1960 war, at the first summit in Belgrade, economic issues had been very important. By the mid-1970s, they had become important issues. Now, gradually the nature of non-alignment has changed to greater importance to the economic issues. Now, if I talk about non-alignment, the nature of non-alignment is termed as neutrality or isolation. The nature of non-alignment, again I am telling, is termed as neutrality or isolation. It has changed to give greater importance to economic issues, which means those non-aligned countries have gave much importance to economic issues. Much more importance was given to the economic issues. So as a result, in 1961, at the first summit in Belgrade, economic issues had been very important. By the mid-1970s, they have become important issues. Now, in 1961, yes, in the year 1961, when there was a meeting in Belgrade, which means when there was a summit in Belgrade, as a result, what had happened? Economic issues have been discussed. Economic issues have been discussed so that the poorer countries can improve themselves, and also by the mid-19 issues, the discussions of the economic development, the discussion of the economic issues has become much prior by the year 1970 or by the era of 1970. As a result, non-aligned movement became an economic pressure group by the late 1980s. However, the NIEO initiative had faded mainly because of the stiff opposition from the developed countries, who acted as a united group while the non-aligned struggled to maintain their unity in the face of the opposition. Now, if I talk about one more thing, yes, here it has been understood about the new international economic order. The new international economic order. You see, non-aligned movement. Non-aligned movement has become an important pressure group. Non-aligned movement became an important pressure group. As a result, as a result, the new international economic order has faded because of the main stiff opposition from the developed countries. You see why the new international economic order has come as an organization. During that time, why new international economic order became a part of the organization. You see, during that time, economic issue was the most important discussion during that time. So new international economic order had took decision regarding the improvement of the poverty, or you can say regarding the economic development of a particular country. But afterwards, when non-aligned movement was coming into power, and have started discussing regarding the economic importance of a particular country, as a result, the new international economic order has faded because due to the steep opposition from the other countries. During that time, there was no use of the new international economic order because the NAM was taking much more decisions regarding the economic improvement. From the developed countries who acted as a united group while the non-aligned struggled to maintain their unity in the face of the opposition. Now, the new international economic order doesn't need its balance, but now the non-aligned movement started to maintain their unity in the face of the opposition. The non-aligned movement means those leaders are making balance in front of the opposition. They are making balance in front of the opposition. You see here, if I talk about some of the points regarding the NAM, it has been very much confusing. First comes regarding now the non-aligned movement and how the non-aligned movement was the part during the Cold War era. And second comes the new international economic order. The new international economic order, how it has took decision regarding the economic issues. And then we have understood about isolationism or neutrality, that how isolationism and neutrality has been a great problem to the other countries as well, who are not making the part of the diplomacy relations. And then fourth comes the economic issues, and economic problem, that how the least developed countries were facing problem as they were economically backward, and how they will be improve their economic condition by participating in the business or trading system with the other developed Western countries. So these are some of the things you must read in this chapter. This is little bit a complicated chapter, but if you read this chapter properly, then you will be understanding more regarding the consequences of this chapter. And another topic that we have studied here regarding the arenas of the Cold War, what are those countries which are being affected during the Cold War, and those how those countries went against the Cold War, and how the other countries who were not participated, who have not participated in the Cold War, they have also prepared for any kind of upcoming war, and how the Cold War, after the Cold War has been controlled, and how the other countries maintain unity with the other countries as well. So these are all the important points that we have studied in this following topic. So if you want to know any of the courses regarding the Bhadra Academy, then you can contact us in this number 863839171. Thank you.